How's it going, everybody? I hope you guys are feeling good and you are ready for the second video of the week. Yes, as I mentioned last time, we are now going to have 2 videos a week instead of 1, and this particular video is very special to me because it's my very first sponsored video, and the sponsor of this series is none other than Autodesk. Autodesk are the makers of Maya, Motion Builder, AutoCAD, and a plethora of other software, and I think no one really can touch them when it comes to 3D software at this point. They are best in business, and they're also great people. We've been talking for a while now, and this is the result of all that chatting between Autodesk and myself, and I thought I'm only going to get a sponsor when I feel is right for my audience, you guys. And there's nothing better than actually having a sponsorship by the makers of the software that I use the most to animate, and I have been using for the last 13 years to animate in my professional career and even before. So this video series are going to be about getting to the practical side of animation, right? We're going to jump into Maya every single video, and we're going to see some things, and I'm going to show you some stuff that has helped me either streamline my process or things that can actually shortcut your process of animation to make it better, to make it more efficient, to make it a little bit more polished perhaps. And we are going to start this series in the most efficient way possible, which is going to be setting up your Maya for the win and making sure that your Maya it's ready for you to kind of like take on the future advice that I'll give you, the more advanced advice that I'll give you later on. So we're going to jump into the computer. I'm going to show you guys this stuff, and I hope you guys enjoy this series going forward. Let's go. Right, so here we are, in front of the computer. My Maya right now is incredibly vanilla. I just got it installed, like most of you will, and it's a blank canvas, right? So here's a few things that I want you to do first and foremost. This window, what's new, highlighting settings. It's actually quite useful the very first times that you use it, and after you see it a few times, most likely the first thing you do it is like, don't show this in startup. If you actually click this link at this box here, it will stop showing you this window. Now, I actually recommend leaving this other highlighting what's new. There's a few things that you can do in order to set up your Maya as an animation tool. As an animator, you actually spend most of your time in this part here, in this timeline, right? Second most used mostly, it's actually your time range. So you'll actually change your time range from big to small, depending on what you need. You can change it either by going down here, or you can just like enter a number and your time range changes. You also have your frames per second. You normally don't want to mess with this setting. You want to leave it at 24, 30 frames, 60 frames, whatever you decide to animate, depending on the project that you are part of. And then you have things like entering commands, mel commands, or Python commands, depending on what you want. And you have here the help bar, so it highlights things that you actually have. So if you actually go through the menus and you keep an eye here on the bottom, you'll see that it will change you and show you what that is and what that means. So all very useful. Now, as you actually become a more experienced animator and you load your animations and you start working, there's a few things here that you won't need to use, and they are cluttering your view as an animator to be able to animate faster. So I'm going to remove a few things. I'm going to show you how to remove a few things in order to kind of streamline your process of animation. The first thing that you probably won't need is some of the shelves. So curves, poly modeling. We're not a modeler, we're an animator. Sculpting, the same thing. Rigging, unless you actually rig and animate, very useful. If you don't rig at all, like myself, not useful whatsoever. Even this animation shelf, there's some buttons that are useful, but not all buttons are useful. So we'll deal with this later. Rendering, depending if you actually do a lot of rendering, yes, but if you're just an animator that doesn't know much about rendering like myself, you don't really need that. VFX, same thing. Caching, custom is where you put your shelf. XGen, Mesh, and motion graphics, all of that stuff is not needed. So in order for you to remove all the shelves that you don't really use, you go to your shelf editor, and then here on your shelf editor, if you make it a little bigger, you can actually see all the shelves that you have available to you right now. And then if you, for example, don't need curves, it will highlight the shelves that you need to see. If you don't need curves, you can just like click remove. Puddle modeling, we don't need, remove. Sculpting, we don't need, remove. Rigging, we don't need, remove. Animation, we're gonna leave it for now. Rendering, don't need it, remove. VFX, same thing. VFX caching, same thing. Custom, we'll leave it because this is where we'll put our special buttons that are specific to us. XGen, not needed. Mesh, not needed. Motion graphics, not needed. And then I already have a shelf here that I created myself for Red 9 tools. So if you save all shelves, then you're gonna have only very minimal shelves that you're gonna be able to use. Make sure that whenever you do a change in Maya, no matter what it is, you always go to Save Preferences after you actually save on the pop-up window, because this will ensure that your Maya is set up the way you actually want it. Now that we actually got rid of that, what we need to actually change now, it's actually the settings in Maya. So if you go to Settings here on the bottom, you're going to have a time slider menu. In that time slider menu, you can set up a few things. So let's say you actually animate all the time at, instead of 24, you animate at 30 frames per second. You can change that, so every time you open your Maya, it's always at 30 frames per second. You can also change the height of your timeline. So I think, to me personally, the standard height that Maya comes with is too small. You can barely see your keys, it's really, really tiny. So you wanna increase that height to be to your liking. So I like to animate normally either 2 times or 4 times. Especially 4 times, I use it more when I'm doing dialogue pieces. So if I'm actually using dialogue, I use 4 times so I can see the wavefrom. But if I actually, I'm just animating, most of the time I use 2 times, and that's okay. So another thing that I like to change is the key tick size. That is how thick your keys are coming through. By default, let me just create a little polygon and cube, let's say. If you actually add keys, they are very thin, as you can see. You want to make them as thick as possible so you can see them. So I like to actually kind of keep them at around 3 times the thickness. That is normal. You can go 4. I like to keep it at 3 so you can actually see what you actually have going on. So for now, we're going to leave it at that. This is all we have to do in the timeline. So let's save that. Now there's a few more changes that you need to do. Let's keep it super simple. But I like, for example, to actually my time slider to keep them separated from the timeline. A lot of the times when I'm animating, sometimes I actually hit this time slider by mistake, and they are very much related. So it makes sense that Autodesk put the time and the time slider next to each other. But I like personally to kind of keep my time slider above here. So that way I can actually move my timeline anytime, anywhere I want, and know that if I set this to 40 frames and this to 2 frames, that will stay there. And I know that I'm not going to change that range for a little while, because I'll be working on this range for a little bit, and then when I'm ready, I'll actually, on purpose and consciously, and it's going to be something that I'll do like only a few times, change it to 30 frames or double click it to go to the whole range. So this is why I like to keep it separate. Now, I also like to remove a few more things in order to keep my display as clean as possible. Instead of using this little guy here, which allows you to quickly enter commands and scripts, you can just go to the script editor and do it there. Go to UI elements. I like to kind of keep the window open, especially in the beginning, because you're gonna have to hide quite a few things. So if you click this little bar at the top, click it, the bar is out. Now, the stuff that I like to change or keep hidden, the helpline. If you're just a new animator and just getting started, then helpline will help you to know exactly what is going on, where, and what button does what. After a while, you probably won't even look at it anymore. You'll just close it and that's it. So because of it, I normally like to hide it. The command line that I was just talking about right now, you also want to hide it because obviously you can use the script editor like I mentioned before, so hide that. The range slider is the one that we moved over here. Time slider is the one that is on the bottom right now. Shelf, we definitely want to keep it up. Status line, that's basically this bar here. We need it for the time being, mainly to change this to animation so you can actually have the menus specific to you as an animator. So we need to actually leave it there. And then something that I actually like to hide, and once again, this is basically after you get used to the hotkeys, it's basically the toolbox. So the toolbox serves two purposes: for you to go between your different tools. So if you're just a brand new animator, you'll actually do this on the toolbox. So you actually go, I want to actually move it, or I want to rotate it, or I want to scale it. And you keep on going from here to here. But after a while, you realize that actually there is pre-built hotkeys that you can select that makes your life much easier by going W, E, R. So this becomes natural to you. So this is what you do all the time. So you'll stop using that for selecting between the different tools. The second use of the toolbar is to change your display views. So you can go from full view to quad view, to having views side by side, to just seeing the outliner, etc., etc. Now, this is yet another thing that you can actually streamline, because if you actually hit the spacebar, you will change between views. And the view that will be selected is the one that your mouse is over. So once again, it's much faster to do this. After you get used to your way of animating and where all the buttons are and how you actually do things, you won't need the toolbox anymore. As soon as you actually hide it, you get so much more to actually animate in, and it feels obstructed, it feels clean. So this is something that I highly advise for you guys to do. You get much more real estate in your screen, and you can actually animate in a much more fluent way. So this should give you a basic setup for an animator. Obviously, everyone works in their own ways. Hopefully, this will actually give you a clean display that will actually allow you to bolt on your own preferences, windows, things on top that will be uncluttered more than anything. As a last step for you guys, when you have your display the way you want it, and you move your windows and you're good to go, make sure to actually save current workspace as your own. So by clicking the button, you have a little window. This window, you can name it whatever. So your own workspace, and click OK. And now when you actually click on My Classic, you go back to how we started this episode. And when you go to your own workspace, you have a clean workspace that works for you. So you can have the best of both worlds. You can jump from the My Classic in case you actually didn't really know exactly which buttons were in what place, and you actually jumped the gun and you went too quickly to this. You can go back to the My Classic, but then as you work through it, you be like, you know what, I feel like I'm a bit more professional now, so I'm gonna go to my own workspace now and see it clean, see how that works, see if I actually have my hotkeys in the right place and I remember them off the top. And that's all I had for you guys in this episode. Short and sweet. As I mentioned, this episode is supposed to be easy to digest, easy to actually kind of see and replicate. So next week, I will actually kind of give you yet another episode. So be ready for that. Until then, stay well, stay safe. Peace.